The courtroom doors creaked open, and in walked a boy. No lawyer, no guardian, no adult, even trailing behind. Just a boyette, maybe 9 years old, clutching a folder too big for his tiny hands, and a look on his face like he was walking into a lion's den wearing paper armor. Everyone turned. The bailiff blinked. The stenographer paused mid-keystroke. Even the judge lowered her glasses and stared, because kids didn't come to court alone. Especially not kids like him, shy quiet, with hair that hadn't been combed and shoes that didn't match. But he stepped forward anyway, and whispered to the clerk, "Dad's busy. So I came alone." No one knew where he'd come from. There was no social worker by his side, no mom with nervous hands, just that oversized folder he carried like a shield. Inside it, handwritten letters, receipts, a drawing of a dog, and most importantly a single, crumpled eviction notice. The clerk hesitated. "Sweetheart, are you lost?" He shook his head once. His voice barely reached her ears. "I'm here for case 47B. The apartment thing." That's when the judge looked down at her docket, and her heart dropped. 47B was a landlord-tenant dispute, a routine eviction, filed by a property company against a man named Marcus Dillard. His tenant, listed as Marcus and dependent minor, Caleb Dillard. This boy was the dependent minor. And there he was standing alone, barely breathing but somehow brave enough to walk into a courtroom where his future was being decided, without anyone to speak for him. So, the judge took off her glasses, and said gently, "Let's give him 5 minutes. Bring me the file." Caleb sat in the second row, legs swinging, not touching the floor. His shoes still didn't match. One sneaker had 3 holes. The other had its laces tied in a knot too tight to untangle. When the bailiff offered him water, he whispered, "Thank you, sir," and held the cup with both hands. The courtroom wasn't busy that day. Just a few civil disputes. A couple from upstairs arguing over custody of a goldfish. A woman suing her neighbor over a fence. And now, this child on the verge of being made homeless because his father, Marcus, hadn't shown up. The judge asked softly, "Where's your dad today, Caleb?" He looked down at his knees. He peeked out a shift. He said if he missed it, he might lose the job. And if he lost the job, then we'd lose the apartment anyway. There was a pause in the courtroom. A silence thicker than law books. The judge glanced at the plaintiff's lawyer, a corporate type with slick hair and expensive shoes. The man cleared his throat and said, "Your Honor, regardless of the boy's presence, Mr. Dillard failed to appear. We move for immediate default judgment and execution of eviction." The words hit like stones, but the boy raised his hand, not high, just enough to be seen. "Excuse me, but I brought some stuff for the judge. My dad didn't know I was coming." The judge motioned him forward. He clutched the folder too, his chest like a teddy bear, then stepped up to the bench with small, determined feet. Inside the folder were more than papers. There were stories, there was heart, there was truth. No lawyer could have spun better. A rent ledger marked with highlighter showing every month his father paid on time, except the last 2. A letter from his dad's supervisor, apologizing for a payroll delay, a drawing of the apartment complete with stick figures of him and his dad cooking noodles, and a note, written in wobbly, uncertain penmanship, "Dear Judge, I know we didn't pay for 2 months, but we didn't mean not to. My dad always says we do the right thing, even when it's hard. He works real hard. Please don't make us leave. My bed is there, and my goldfish." The judge didn't blink for a while. Then she read the letter out loud. No one moved. Even the corporate lawyer shifted uncomfortably in his shiny shoes. Because you can argue with contracts, but it's hard to argue with a child's plea for home. The judge leaned forward. "Caleb, did your father know you came here today?" He shook his head. "No, ma'am, I took the bus. I saved some lunch money for it. He'd be mad if he knew, but I couldn't let someone take our house without at least trying." "How old are you?" "Almost 9, in October. Do you understand what this hearing is for?" "Yes, ma'am. It means if the papers say so, we have to leave, and we don't have nowhere else." "Do you have any other family?" He paused. "My mom left when I was little. It's just me and Dad, and my goldfish, his name's Bucket." Someone in the gallery sniffled. It might have been the court reporter. The judge sat back in her chair, and the silence that followed wasn't courtroom silence. It was sacred. Like the whole room agreed. This wasn't just a case anymore. It was a life. The plaintiff's lawyer stood again. "Your Honor, while this is touching, the law is the law. Emotional pleas, especially by minors, do not." "I've heard enough," the judge said. She looked directly at Caleb. "You said your dad works hard." He nodded. Double quotes. "Where does he work?" "Barrel and Stone. It's a diner near our place. He washes dishes and helps close up. Then he's working today." "Yes, ma'am. He takes any shift they give him." She looked to the clerk. "Call the diner. Tell them Judge Harrison would like a word with Mr. Dillard." The clerk's eyes widened. "Yes, Your Honor." Back in the diner kitchen, Marcus Dillard was scrubbing a greasy pan when the landline rang. He almost didn't hear it over the sizzle of onions. "Barrel and Stone. Marcus speaking." "Mr. Dillard, came a voice on the line, crisp and authoritative. This is Judge Eleanor Harrison, District Court 17. Are you aware your son Caleb is in my courtroom right now, representing your family in Case 47B? There was silence. Then, the clatter of a pan hitting the floor. My son did what? Marcus didn't ask for a break. He didn't hang up the phone. He didn't even take off his apron. He just ran, out the back door, through the alley, past a row of rusted dumpsters and a city that didn't care. His legs burned, his chest ached, but nothing compared to the throb in his heart when he realized his sweet, quiet Caleb had taken a bus, crossed a city, and walked into a courtroom alone to stop them from losing their home. Tears blurred his vision, but still, he ran. Because sometimes, being a father isn't about perfection, that's about showing up when it matters most, and he had 5 blocks left to prove he was still trying. 23 minutes later, the courtroom door burst open. Everyone turned again. This time, it wasn't a boy. It was a man, soaked in sweat, wearing a food-stained apron, holding his breath like he'd sprinted straight through the city and hadn't stopped to think. Your Honor, he panted. I'm Marcus Dillard, Caleb's father. I didn't know he was. The judge raised a hand, but her voice was gentle. We know, Mr. Dillard. Please, take a moment. Marcus looked at his son. Caleb didn't speak. He just smiled shyly and held up the folder. I brought this stuff, Dad. And that's when Marcus, this big, tired man who'd worked himself to the bone for years, did something most men never do in court. He knelt beside his son and cried. Judge Harrison waited for the room to quiet. Then she looked down at them both, father and son. No lawyer, no advocate, no polished legal defense. Just love. Raw and imperfect, but real. She cleared her throat. Mr. Dillard, I've reviewed the file your son brought. She held up the folder like a sacred object. In my years on this bench, I've seen corporate fraud, violent crime, and everything in between. But I have never seen a child argue for a roof over his head with more grace than most attorneys in this city. Marcus blinked. I didn't know he even understood what was happening. He did, the judge said, because he's been watching. Children always do. Then she turned to the plaintiff's lawyer. Counsel, you requested a default judgment. I'm denying it. This case has stayed pending further investigation. The lawyer sputtered, but Your Honor, my courtroom is not a machine for rubber stamping evictions. It is a place for justice. Then she looked at Caleb. Justice showed up today, wearing mismatched shoes. She banged her gavel once, then leaned toward her clerk and whispered something. No one could hear. The clerk nodded and left the room. When she returned, she was carrying something strange for a courtroom. A gift bag. The judge looked directly at Caleb and said, Do you know what this is? Caleb shook his head. It's something my staff puts together for the children who inspire us. We call it the Little Lion Award. We only give out 3 a year. She handed it to him. Inside was a soft stuffed lion, a court-branded certificate, and a note signed in calligraphy, to Caleb Dillard, for bravery in the face of injustice. Caleb held the lion like it was made of gold. The whole room clapped, even the bailiff, even the plaintiff's lawyer, who suddenly looked very small in his polished shoes. The story didn't end in that courtroom, because someone had been filming. Not for drama, but because a clerk, moved by the moment, had discreetly pressed record when Caleb approached the bench. That video, it hit the internet before Marcus and Caleb even got home, and within 48 hours, it had over 6.2 million views. Shy boy walks into court alone to save home. The headline read, People donated. People wrote letters. The diner gave Marcus a promotion. A retired attorney offered pro bono help, and the landlord, faced with public pressure, withdrew the eviction altogether. But the real miracle was what happened in Caleb's heart. A week later, the judge received a letter. It wasn't legal, it wasn't formal, it was written in crayon. It read, Dear Judge Harrison, thank you for not letting the paper be stronger than my voice. I think courtrooms are scary, but kind also. Bucket says hi. He's still swimming. Love, Caleb D. She framed it in her office, right above the law degree she'd once thought was her proudest achievement, until a boy reminded her that courage doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers and still wins. Months passed. Marcus found steadier work. Caleb started writing little essays, short stories, letters to people who felt invisible. One day, he stood in front of his class and read aloud an essay titled, The Day I Went to Court Alone. Half the class cried. The teacher submitted it to a citywide competition. Caleb won. But instead of keeping the prize money, he asked if it could be used to help any other kid who needs a bus fare to fight for their home. They called it the Caleb card. And judges across the city quietly adopted it. Because justice starts small, and sometimes wears 2 different shoes. They say the law is blind, but maybe, sometimes it just needs a little help. Seeing, from a boy who didn't raise his voice, didn't break the rules, didn't throw a fit. He just showed up. With a folder, a lion in his chest, and the belief that maybe, just maybe, someone would listen. And someone did. Not because he was loud, but because he was brave. Because he stood where grown men wouldn't. Because he showed up when no one else did. And because in a world full of paperwork, one boy reminded us, the paper may hold the law, but the heart holds the truth.